Tonight, minimum wage earners get a boost while critics of the carbon tax head to Confederation Building to push back.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Good evening and welcome to a special holiday edition of Here and Now. We begin tonight on the West Coast, where communities are cleaning up after a weekend of nasty weather and major flooding. As you can see, roadways were swept away by heavy rain on Friday evening. The community of Cape St. George on the Port-au-Port Peninsula was hit the hardest. Culverts completely washed away, tearing through guardrails, damaging homes. The full scope of the damage is not yet known. Mayor Stella Cornick says she was there when the culverts let loose. She says it was frightening to see it in person.
Scared me to death. Like I was watching it from the bank and it scared me. You saw the water rushing and the road was there, and all of a sudden you saw these culverts coming out of the water and culverts, right? And like it's petrifying. The scariest part Friday night was knowing that we were cut off from the world. About approximately 650 people were completely cut off, and I didn't sleep because I was scared to death. We were going to have a fire or emergency call. Overall, they're coping. We are happy that we have access now to services. That was the main thing. But I guess the main thing on everybody's mind is because there is so much damage, and I know there are a few people has been told by their insurances that they're not covered because act of God or something. So there are a lot of people worried about that. Like if they're not covered, who's going to help them? That's our biggest concern out here now. Who's going to help? And now we're just compiling a list. It's going to take us maybe a week or two to get the list ready. People now are just sending me the list of things that they got lost in the flood. So I say it was going to take us probably a week or two to get that list compiled. Plus, we have the infrastructure of our town itself. Our maintenance people are taking a tally on what's going on out there. So like our lanes that we take care of and the ones that we got to get fixed, that's a big money. That's a big dollar figure.
And just have a look at this. Photos shared by the town clerk of Lark Harbor on the southern shore of the Bay of Islands. A landslide upended this home in the community, pushed it off its foundation. On the other side, a raging river. No injuries were reported. Well, it's April 1st, which means the federal carbon tax increase takes effect. At the pumps, gas is up 3.8 cents per liter. Diesel is up 4.7 cents per liter. Dozens gathered outside the Confederation Building this morning to protest. Here Now's Mark Quinn has more.
People here say the carbon tax has to go.
Cost of living has gone to hell, and our elected officials don't care about the seniors, the price of groceries, housing crisis. It's all across Canada.
Today, as scheduled, the federal tax on gasoline climbed from 14 cents per litre to more than 17 cents. The tax also pushed up the price of diesel. The federal government says most people, about 8 in 10 Canadians, will get more money back in federal rebates than they'll pay in carbon taxes. But some here would rather see the tax and its rebates scrapped.
They don't send us out these rebates, which I call glorified welfare checks and stuff. We're working people, right? We don't need to. They don't need to take our money and then send it back to us like because they're showing us pity.
My fellow Newfoundlanders.
Organizers here say protesters also gathered in Lewisport, Gander and Corner Brook to rally against the tax.
We're pretty silent people, but this is the time not to be silent because this has gone too far. And hopefully we can make a change.
Elaine Thomas said there's no doubt in her mind that climate change is happening, but she doesn't believe the tax will help stop it.
There's other ways to fight climate change, and we kind of all know that. This is just a government tactic.
Newfoundland and Labrador's premier has been writing the federal government asking for it to pause today's tax increase. In his most recent letter on Saturday, Fury asked Prime Minister Trudeau to convene an emergency meeting of leaders to discuss alternative ways to address climate change. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
And as you heard there, the Premier is again appealing to the Prime Minister to press pause on the carbon tax until there are improvements to affordability. Andrew Furey says the issue bears repeating. The April 1st tax will impact some parts of the country more than others, and points out that Newfoundland and Labrador is 3 times the size of other Atlantic provinces combined. Furey goes on to say that nearly all citizens have made adjustments to decarbonize, often at a significant cost. He's reminding the Prime Minister that goods still need to be shipped and trucked throughout the province. There is no rail or subway system, and that while infrastructure to support electric vehicles is improving, it's still inadequate. Furey says the carbon tax may work in urban centres, but it won't have the same environmental impact here. Andrew Furey is also asking the Prime Minister to call an emergency meeting with leaders across the country to discuss alternatives. Well, minimum wage is up by 60 cents today. That puts the province's minimum wage at $15.60 an hour. Wages went up in all 4 Atlantic provinces today, but Newfoundland and Labrador had the biggest jump. This province has the highest minimum wage on the East Coast. And staying with salaries, a new report is recommending that MHAs get a $25,000 raise. If approved, it would be the first time those wages have increased in 15 years. The CBC's Jessica Singer has more.
MHAs haven't had a raise since 2009. The Members' Compensation Review Committee calls that a detriment to the province's democracy. It released a report recommending MHAs make $120,000 and adjusted based on the Consumer Price Index. That report was written by the former Deputy Justice Minister Heather Jacobs, who was appointed by the House of Assembly in November to head the committee. Jacobs also wrote that salaries should be raised for those MHAs who get extra money for other duties, like being the Speaker or the Leader of the Opposition. And she recommends 10 new additional salary positions be created, like a Deputy Chair of Committees who should get $15,000 above the MHA salary. All of these increases will cost close to $1 million. Jacobs wrote the province is in a strong economic and stable financial position. But the report came to that conclusion based on numbers in the 2023 budget. The budget last week showed the deficit for the current fiscal year is far higher than the government expected just a year ago. Jessica Singer, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, former Lieutenant Governor Judy Foote is in recovery following a stroke. Foote shared on social media this weekend that she suffered a stroke in late February and lost strength in her core and her left leg as a result, which has affected her ability to walk. Foote says she spent the past month in recovery at the Miller Centre in St. John's and thanked the staff for their care. She's now at home and says she'll continue rehab as an outpatient. After more than 2 months, a mysterious shipwreck on the island's west coast has been retrieved from the water. 2 excavators pulled the Cape Ray shipwreck out of the sea yesterday. It's now safe on the sand, safe from the surf, and has been cut into 3 pieces. The next challenge is preserving the wreck, which some experts say could cost millions.
It's a relief to me because it was very time consuming and it was a lot of hard work. And we had so many people looking at us and saying, okay, you guys are not going to get out of the water. That's not going to happen, right? But I mean, you don't give up on something so important. So
we're going to have to be looking for funding from government, COA grants and stuff to probably build a building around it because it's huge. The boat itself is only partial down there now, and they're saying it was probably over 200 feet in length when it was sailing.
Well, spring fun was in full force this weekend at the Rooms in St. John's. CBCNL co-hosted a family fun day on Saturday with live music, crafts, and even a little Easter candy, of course. The CBC's Jessica Singer swung by to ask kids what they like most about the holiday and also to help translate. Just have a look.
What do you like most about Easter?
Easter Bunny.
Oh, the Easter Bunny. Is he cute?
Yeah. Coloring Easter stuff.
Coloring Easter stuff. And do you also like chocolate?
Yes. I like jelly bean s'mores.
What's your favorite part about Easter?
The Easter Bunny. Easter egg.
Easter eggs.
Easter egg.
And what comes in an Easter egg?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
And then jelly beans.
And jelly beans.
The chocolate that you get and spending family time.
And what's your favorite part about Easter?
I do kind of like waking up early.
Oh, you like waking up early?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I don't know. When you're sleeping, you don't really, you don't feel time passing. I like to live the most of my life.
I like getting all the chocolate.
Well, lots to clean up in Stephenville, where there was significant flooding over the weekend. High water levels caused the closure of several sections of the road in Massachusetts Drive area and on Big Port Harmon. And thanks so much to Darren for sharing this bird's eye view of some of that damage.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how much rain fell over the weekend. It's going to be a bit of an unsettled week as well. We'll get into all the forecast details coming up.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. The bonus prize deadline is midnight, Friday, April 12th. Order tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
Ashley, just some incredible footage that we saw earlier in the show from the West Coast and all of that rain. How much rain did come down?
Yeah, it was quite a bit right across really western portions of the island. For 96 hours, the rain fell, and then that ended on Saturday, and anywhere from 90 to 120 millimeters of rain fell over that period of time. You got on top of that some of the snow melt as well, which definitely added to it because of those incredible temperatures through the weekend. But that has since changed. Those temperatures have dropped now. We've got more of an onshore flow. That northerly flow is at play versus that southerly flow that brought all of that moisture. But we're still seeing some unsettled conditions along with some cooler air associated with that as well. You can kind of see here some of that green showing up. That's some milder, more marine level air, and we are seeing that towards the coast, and that is leading to some shower activity in some cases as well. So we've got temperatures really anywhere from 1 to 7 degrees island-wide, and then up across Labrador as well. The coolest temperatures today in Lab City at about -3 this afternoon. But lots of flurries being seen as well across the island, really in that onshore flow, and then some showers and or flurries happening for the west coast as well. Now, as far as the temperatures are concerned right now, they're starting to drop a little bit. We're down to 1 degree in Mary's Harbor. You're seeing some mist at the moment, but as we head through the night, as those temperatures drop, Environment Canada has a freezing drizzle advisory, so you can expect that mist to start creating some slippery surfaces as we head through the evening hours tonight. Overall, we're looking at the unsettled conditions continuing tonight right across the board as we see that onshore flow continue as well, with the chance of flurries or showers for most of us, with temperatures hovering around 0 or a little bit below. The coolest temperatures will be in Lab City tonight at about -10. But again, those northerly winds are going to stick around, and that will be the story through tomorrow as well. Pretty much a carbon copy. We may see a few peaks of sun in the mix across parts of the province, but overall, that onshore flow will continue, and it is going to keep the temperatures a little bit cool tomorrow as well, especially towards the coast. Anywhere from 2 to about 5 degrees through the day. Up across Labrador, you are looking at your temperatures anywhere from about 1 to 4 as well. If we take a look at the long-range forecast, it is going to stay chilly with temperatures above 0, though, anywhere from 2 to 3 degrees, as well as the chance of some showers or flurries right through the week. That will be the story for central and western Newfoundland. Your overnight lows will dip into the minus single digits just barely. And then for eastern Labrador, you're looking at your temperatures above 0. Again, flurries or showers certainly still possible. Your overnight lows are going to dip a little cooler into the minus single digits and minus double digits for western Labrador as we get into Saturday. Your weather photo of the day, a lovely shot down on southern areas of the Avalon. This is St. Stephen's. Thank you to Doreen for that photo. And if you have any weather photos that you would like to share with us, the best place to do that is email them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
I think our forefathers and grandfathers would crawl out of the graves of what's happening here in Newfoundland.
When we joined Canada, we're too small about problems for anybody in that Ottawa to even care about us. They don't care about us.
What some people on the Hill had to say about joining Canada on this 75th anniversary. Stay with us for more Confederation coverage just ahead. Well, the province is marking 75 years of Confederation. It was on midnight, March 31st, that Newfoundland and Labrador became Canada's 10th province. Host of CBC Radio's The Signal, Adam Walsh, invited a panel of young people into the studio to reflect on that anniversary with a look to the future. We're dedicating the rest of Here and Now to that special presentation.
I'm Adam Walsh, host and producer of The Signal. It's been 3/4 of a century since what is now Newfoundland and Labrador joined Canada. Marking the anniversary, the provincial government has a slew of stuff planned for throughout this year. Community celebrations, special license plates, and cultural projects. Today, here, we are having a conversation I'm calling Confederation 75. I have a panel of younger folks to talk about how Confederation's history impacts us today, about some lessons learned, and also they're going to take a look ahead at what's to come and what they hope is to come. Joining me here in studio, we've got Christina Ennis, Draco Dunphy, Cassandra Drodge, and Lauren Slade. How y'all doing?
Excellent.
Great. Fabulous.
In the lead-up to today, I spoke with Memorial University history professor Sean Cadigan. So throughout the course of the hour, I've got 3 different clips to play. And this first one, it's a bit of context, so it touches on a lot of what we're kind of touching on right now. So let's give this a listen, and then I'll ask y'all what you think about it.
There was tremendous social and economic inequality in Newfoundland in the 1930s. There'd always been tremendous social and economic inequality. Most people are familiar with the divisions between, say, fish merchants and fishers in outports, right? The fishing industry always had trouble providing incomes that would support, profitable businesses for most merchants and good incomes for the fishers who dealt with them. And thus we had the truck system and all the conditions that went along with it, terrible exploitation and so on. In the St. John's area, the economic conditions were better. There was more employment, but a lot of that employment rested on 2 things. Railway development, which was very expensive and had proved to be a huge drain on the Dominion's coffers without ever really providing us with a railway industry that was self-supporting. It was always a drain on the public. And then there was protected manufacturing. The belief that we could build a manufacturing base by protecting the local market against cheaper imports from outside the province. The problem with that is that putting tariffs on imported goods meant that you were increasing the cost of living for most rural people who were already finding it hard to make good livelihoods in the fishing industry. Now, there were bright spots, particularly in the pulp and paper sector, in paper making and so on, but still there were an awful lot of people who depended directly on the fishery, and there was an awful lot of economic distress in the context of the very low prices and poor international economic conditions of the 30s. So that's the general context. So there's a lot of economic uncertainty and distress everywhere. And so this translates into all kinds of social problems, lack of access for many people to good medical care, poor housing in the St. John's area for working class people. There were all kinds of social problems, many of them that would be familiar to people today.
Memorial University history professor Sean Cadigan there. Anything jump out at us from that, the couple of minutes of context from Professor Cadigan?
That we're having the exact same conversations now in 2024 that we were having in 1930. Particularly what sticks out to me is the discussion around housing and people being homeless. We are seemingly more concerned with finding physical space for these people rather than addressing the socioeconomic components and barriers that lead people to that in the first place.
Anyone else on that?
The tariffs comment that he made. I learned yesterday as well that when we joined Canada, a lot of Newfoundland's free trade agreements disappeared virtually kind of overnight. And the cost of goods getting to the island it increased kind of immediately, and we couldn't do anything about it. And that disproportionately affected Newfoundland and Labrador, particularly rural areas, in comparison to the rest of Canada. And given our geography and our previous link to Britain and, the trade routes through shipping and things like that versus rail was very, very different. And so, yes, a lot of people were very much lifted out of poverty at the time, but costs very much went up as well.
Yeah, things are complex, right? And then you look at today, what do we talk about a lot? Cost of living. We talk about food security. Again, these echoes are these...
Access to the province.
Yeah, right, access.
Affordable access. Yeah.
And I think we still see like a huge parallel between this idea of economic uncertainty and risk management, especially when we look at the fishing industry, right? Like we still have protests almost every April that focus directly on like these unfair prices. And I think in 2020, I think Keith Sullivan was up there at the Confederation Building comparing this to mercantile times, the trucking system, basically highlighting this idea that, folks here, they've never had control of their fish. And I'd also like to add that, settler folks have not had, access to full control of their fish, and Indigenous people have it even worse, even further, inability to access these things. And so I think right now in 2024, we're still looking at how to be able to value our fish, how to export it, how to keep our licenses here, and how to pass them down generationally. It's getting harder and harder to finance your own license because of the cost of boats, because of the cost of fish, and not necessarily having those things equate out to like a profit or even something that's able to sustain like your business, whether you're like small scale or large scale fisher. So I still feel like there's strife between federal, provincial governments and fishing communities, specifically rural communities. There definitely is room for more environmental tools that can be used, especially by local fishers, to be able to mitigate uncertain market costs, right, for fish quotas and stuff. So I guess I'll stop there, but I see a lot of problems, but I also see a lot of solutions.
All right, and we can work towards some of these solutions too. And with the look at Draco, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I feel very strongly that Confederation did well was doing away with the truck system. I know in my own family personally, I believe it was my fourth great-grandfather died on a fishing trip, and the merchant extorted my family, the widow, for a huge amount of land over one single barrel of meat. Right. That doesn't seem reasonable at all, but that was the way the truck system worked. So that's the one thing I'm most pleased with. But at the same time, I echo these sentiments. We're dealing with a lot of the same problems. It seems that every April, just on the way here, we were listening to fish harvesters and listening to that on the radio. But at the same time, when I look at it, we're dealing with the same problems, but we don't have the same self-determination now. We don't have the rights to control our own fisheries. We don't have those rights. And I don't think in Canada we can, really. We have 7 seats out of 338 seats in the House of Commons. The number of seats required to have your own political party is 15 to be recognized and to be given funds to advocate for yourself. And that just doesn't seem right to me. I don't think we're on equal footing in this matter, and I almost feel like we're worse off. And that's a sad thing. With respect to a lot of the things that came after Confederation, well, everyone got those. Now, will we have the same degree? I'm not sure. But we would have improved in education almost certainly. We would have improved in healthcare almost certainly. But at the same time, I don't feel very strongly that we've gone in a good direction.
I'm Adam Walsh, host and producer of The Signal. You're listening to Confederation 75. It's a conversation about Confederation's history, its impacts on us today, some lessons we've learned, and a look ahead at what's to come and what we hope is to come. I've got another clip from Professor Cadigan. So again, history professor with Memorial University. And here is Professor Cadigan.
Now, there are, of course, tremendous, there are huge differences in many perspectives on what the problems are that need to be addressed. I expect that today, environmental concerns are acute. We have lots of concerns related to the relationship between energy production, global warming, for example. So those are huge issues. But there are also much different perspectives now on what are the origins of social problems and economic problems that confront the peoples of the province. And so I think in 2024, we probably don't really think about Newfoundlanders anymore. We know that there are diverse peoples who live within the political boundaries of the province, who've often had very problematic relationships with each other and with the federal government. We have the relationship between settlers and Indigenous peoples. We have all of the relationships between what we now think of as a very diverse set of communities that we try to be more inclusive about, but are peoples who all have different types of social and economic needs that need to be met. And many people feel probably aren't yet being met very well. And so those are far more vocal and articulate things than might have existed in the 1940s. Not to say that these issues weren't there, but they weren't being articulated particularly well. Classic example is that in the late 1940s, you mightn't find so many people talking about the particular concerns of rural women over the nature of social and economic development in their communities. Who's going to provide good health care to people? Who's going to provide schooling for children? And so on. So there were, in other words, important gender differences in how people might have thought about what was necessary, what would be brought by Canada to Newfoundland and Labrador as a province. I think now people are much more aware of these differences and they're articulated better. So I think 75 years later, it's a much more complicated environment in which people are much better advocates for what they need themselves. And so this is no longer simply a question of what a province gets from the federal arrangement, but it's about what diverse peoples living within the geopolitical borders of that province get from the negotiations between that province and the federal government. So it's a more complicated world now.
Any thoughts there on what Professor Sean Cadigan had to say, the history prof, right? Because last bit, it's a really more complicated world, right? True. But what are your thoughts on what he was saying? Go ahead.
Can I kick us off with a quote?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we started talking about how the issues that were then kind of permeated generations, and we're still seeing very similar issues now. And it's very interesting. Frank Moore said this in 1979. That was 45 years ago, and that was 30 years into Confederation. He said there are whole new areas of social concern, unforeseen or deemed irrelevant 45 years ago. And that's literally extremely relevant and accurate even now. And it's like the same issues, they're just kind of modernized. And there's a layer of technology or mobility or,
And we have words for it.
We have words for it.
Whereas before, we didn't have words for the things that were going on. So we just, I feel like, brushed them off to the side.
We're dealing with climate change and, rural development. And also like community development because, it's not news to us that we have seen out-migration of our own locals, as well as like kind of an influx of migration of folks since probably like around 2012. But of course, like way before then, but just it felt like kind of like a wave there. And it just keeps getting better and bigger, which is great. And I think, like there's two parts to this. There's, community building, and then there's like providing good jobs in a place that has predominantly relied on oil and gas, which becomes really complicated. So I guess, on one side, we want to ensure that we include folks that are here and that we are able to facilitate a pathway for like diversity and equity and also employment pathways for newcomers. But we also want to make sure that we have like responsible industries so that we can fall on them. And I think responsible industries is something new to the game. And it's something that I think echoes a lot, especially in the fishing industry and even the oil and gas industry, right? But I think responsible means quite different in those two avenues. And I would just like to bring up my cooperative background because I am mentoring a fishing cooperative with Kimberly Oren down there in Petty Harbor Fishing for Success. And it's the Women's Fishing and Cultural Co-op. So basically it will help establish, obviously, small-scale fishing ventures with the opportunity for women and newcomers to facilitate fishing skills and to hopefully employ them through various means of fishing, from every part to being on the land, to being on the boat, all the way back to processing.
Cassie, what you're touching on too there, it's going back to the clip we just played with Professor Cadigan, talking about like Newfoundlander and people identifying. But what you're touching on, it's that building, maintaining, saving, building on culture that from a Newfoundlander to a Newfoundlander and Labradorian to just anyone living in the lands that you can call Newfoundland and Labrador, it is some of that, I guess, shared culture that gets built, which is what you're kind of pointing to.
I think the heart of this is really just highlighting that Newfoundland traditional fishing culture, as well as being able to facilitate, because integrate is not the word. Like, we don't want to force people to be a certain way, to look a certain way, to act a certain way. We want to be able to facilitate a pathway where they feel like, this is my home. Like, I'm a Newfoundlander and I'm also like from India, or like myself, I'm a Newfoundlander. I'm also Jamaican. I'm Black, I'm mixed, and that's okay.
Yeah, we're allowed to be complex. We can have different parts.
Exactly.
Draco, any thoughts?
It's funny too, talking about Indigenous people, because we were on the table in Confederation, but we weren't at the table.
Yeah.
And that's something that should never happen. And we see from that, Churchill Falls, we see Muskrat Falls. We see all the consequences of us not being at the table, about decisions made about the land without consent of Indigenous peoples. So I find it very funny, and it's similar. I see aspects of cultural degradation and rootlessness, that is to be without roots, that comes from Confederation. You see people talking about the issues of the culture being lost, the language being lost, the way we spoke being lost.
From what some of the comments you're making, I'm also thinking about reconciliation, right? There's lots of talk about reconciliation. What do you think around action and what's happening with it?
I work as a language research specialist with First Life Friendship Center, and one of the things that coming across in my research is just all the talk about, we should be training this. In March 2019, the House of Commons or House of Assembly records, there's talk, a motion or question time, saying that we should be training Innu Amun translators and Inuktitut translators, but I haven't seen that work happen. And that was in 2019, the International Year of Indigenous Languages. Now we're in 2022, 2032, the International Decade for Indigenous Languages. And I'm still not seeing that work happen despite commitments. Memorial University, for instance, is committed to implementing degree and diploma programs in Indigenous languages, but I'm not seeing the momentum there.
Yeah, so when we talk about reconciliation, you want to see action, and you're not seeing it from your vantage point.
I'm not seeing the reconciliation. There's no action in this.
There's a lot of challenges, right? Yeah. We're talking about building community, but we're talking about folks feeling like they're not connected to things, or lack of inaction around reconciliation. What else do we think about challenges that we need to try to overcome, and how do we start to push towards overcoming them?
There was, of course, some good things that came out of Confederation. The baby bonus was the first time that a lot of women had access to their own funds. For the first time in their lives, they had money that they got to choose, ideally, what to do with. However, when we look at the state of things now and how decisions are made, there's still a lot of decisions that our current government federal, provincial, local governments in some cases perhaps, where women are disproportionately affected by the decisions that are made. The province introduced GBA Plus into their decision-making process, gender-based analysis. So as an inclusion effort, it's supposed to be analyzed for all decisions that are being made. And if you look at those records, is that GBA Plus analysis being conducted in a meaningful way? And are changes being made as a result of those analyses? I'm not so certain. And an example of that, the cost of living checks, when we had a surprise surplus that one time. Couples received double the money than a single mother. And I grew up with a single mother, and I very much, that was instantly came to my mind when that policy came out, which, sure, it sounded awesome. I'm going to get a couple $100 in my pocket. But then when you kind of look at it, it's like, well, if you're a single mother with 3 children, you're getting $500. The couple next door, who are both employed and have 1 child, getting double the amount of money. Does that seem? Didn't seem such an awesome decision to me.
I think they're like missing the mark on equal versus equitable, where you're giving people like what you think makes sense and what you think is equal, but you haven't actually considered the circumstances.
Exactly.
Right. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Cassandra, thoughts?
I specialize in, sustainability and community development. So I see a lot of similarities here with regards to like needing a strategic plan and everything sounding really great. And, businesses wanting to make the shift, but not necessarily knowing how to do that. And I know that Professor Cadigan did mention, energy use and climate change and, oil and gas dependency, I think, is all those things are definitely really relevant to our province. And so I guess with regards to that, there should be more, government strategy to not only bring in very small to medium scale renewable ventures, but to also include like women and Indigenous folks in the decision making and Black people, because we're here too.
I'm Adam Walsh, host and producer of The Signal. You were listening and watching. You were watching and listening to Confederation 75. We are talking about the history of Confederation, the impacts on us today, lessons we've learned from it, and a look ahead at what's to come and what we hope is to come. Joining me here in studio, we've got Christina Ennis, Draco Dunphy, Cassandra Drodge, and Lauren Slade. It's a panel discussion looking at everything I just mentioned. So we have one other clip to play from history professor Sean Cadigan of Memorial University. And this, it ties into a lot of what's come up organically in this conversation. It's about having a plan.
When we look at the past 20 years, we had a very brief moment in which the offshore oil and gas sector generated a tremendous amount of wealth and revenue in this province. The question was, what do we do with it? And I think that for me it was, where's the plan, right? Where's the plan? And my fear is that the plan locally, and the federal government wasn't much involved in this, it was a much more provincial issue, was probably no more sophisticated than we'll have another big energy development to succeed oil and gas. And that was, hydroelectricity in Muskrat Falls. I'm not sure how that worked out for us, right? So it's the plan for me that's important, right? Is there a plan? Is there a consensus, a process at arriving at a good sort of popular consensus that this is a good plan that works for most people, or is it a plan that works for particular interest groups who represent their interest as if it's everybody's interest? And I think that that's the difficulty of politics generally. So I'm always kind of looking for that plan. I think that that's what people were probably hoping for in the 1940s, that somehow out of Confederation, a clear plan for future development would emerge. I think we're still hoping in 2024 for that plan.
Plan. I mean, there can be lots of plans, right?
Yeah, there can be. I think the first plan is to make sure that we have our post-secondary and trades institutions, as well as other stakeholders involved in just transition employment and training opportunities for people here, as well as folks who are coming into the province to be able to facilitate jobs at our home. I think one of the benefits, anyway, this is the first and only time you'll ever hear me say this, so get this good, people. The only benefits of the oil and gas industry ever being here, is the direct and indirect jobs that it gave to rural communities. That's something that I cannot deny. And I've spoken to people on the phone about this throughout the province, or the island specifically. And if we could model something that wasn't as environmentally damaging, and something that would provide jobs directly to people who were trained in that specific field at home in their community, and to be able to bring in other folks to facilitate whatever niches, will not only create a better rapport between folks within that community, but it will also boost their their internal economy. Restaurants will start seeing more people, hotels will start seeing more people, you'll start seeing Airbnbs, tourist things being used, you name it, right? So I think we as the province should be putting more pressure on oil and gas industries to make those responsible decisions. And I mean, we have one of the most amazing groups of people when it comes to a province. We are very skilled. We're getting diverse. We like to say that we're really nice and we're friendly. I like to believe that too sometimes. But I think it's just standing up and showing our value and really sticking to it, like Draco said, saying this isn't good enough. We need you to do better. So
yeah, it's the difference between people say, well, we're listening, and actually hearing what you have to say and what different communities have to say. Lauren, thoughts?
I think that plans are obviously a very important part of this conversation, but without action, the plans don't mean anything.
Oh, it's easy to write some. Just there you go, another one for the shelf. Plan 14, shelf 18.
And what's sticking out most for me as somebody who studies corrections is obviously the plan to build a new facility in the metro region. And we've had all these plans made, I think, since 2019. And what do we have to show for it? Nothing. We're shoving more people into that prison that is outdated, rodent infested, and understaffed. So like where is the missing piece there? I don't understand.
In a time when we have a health accord and we talk about the importance of wraparound supports, right? And then you look at HMP and all of the news stories that got done around it, and for everything you just said.
Yeah.
Plan.
One word.
So my thoughts on the plan. Planning isn't always easy. There's big plans, there's little plans. The plan, I think if we were less drinking from a fire hose as a province, literally all of the time, and had a bit more of a cohesive outlook that included analysis and fiscal responsibility around implementing a variety of social programs, and if the government could demonstrate that they're making sound decisions, it would go a long way with trust, even just internally, with the divide that's created constantly by perceived haphazard decisions.
Just looking at Confederation, I know we're talking about the 75th anniversary. I would just want to give a quote from the 50th anniversary that happened in 2009 of the resettlement of some Inuit communities, Nuktak and Hebron. It's from Kenny Girarsi. He said, "I'm not celebrating that 50th anniversary of getting kicked out of my hometown, out of my own home." And I just think to myself, you know, we have 6 seats in the Senate of 105. We have 7 seats in the House of Assembly. In the entire history of Canada, there's been 1 Supreme Court justice, and that happened in 2016. I don't feel like we're on equal terms in Canada, and I don't think that we're going to feel very good until that happens. In whatever way, whether we get some say over our own natural resources to a meaningful way, I think that that's really what it comes down to. But we can't control what the federal government does, but we can control what we do. You know, I think about leadership. I'm in university studying business, and one of the things we look at is, you know, when you've got a good leader, when you've got someone who's fighting for you, with you, that's something you believe in. Performance goes up at that time. I don't think we've had a province that has believed in the government in a long time. You know, I think in 2008, earlier than that, and Danny Williams' years might be the last time we had a pretty unanimous way of saying, hey, I actually believe we're doing something right here. Danny had pretty unreal numbers for a politician. I think high 80s, 90s at the time. But, you know, I think it's time that we have a government that steps up for us.
All right. We will leave it there for today. That concludes the special showing of The Signal's Confederation 75. Thank you, panelists, and thank you all for watching and all of you for listening. It's been great.